All right, we'll come to order now. Thank you all for coming. Hope you had enough to eat.
Very good.
I have a couple announcements before we get started. Cliff has asked me to make sure you fill out the survey after this is over. We received an ATLA grant, and that's part of the deal of getting a grant. It gives us feedback on how it went, if you learned what you needed to learn and all that. Also, we're videotaping the presentation, and Armin, gracious enough, he's going to share his PowerPoints for the presentation this morning and this afternoon, and we'll make those available probably on the SEPTLA website. Over in the left-hand corner says workshops and presentations. So there's already some there, but we'll add today's events on it. And I need my reading glasses. He likes questions. So during the presentation, feel free to ask questions. Don't be shy about that. And finally, one more announcement. Sandy had said after this is over and after you turn in your surveys, if you would like a library tour, that will happen at the end. Grace Mullins, Grace, she will be happy to give you a tour of the library and the rare books room.
Excuse me, Donna.
Yes.
Did you pass the surveys out? Oh, I'm sorry. No, this is from...
Cliff will pass them out.
I could pass them out now, but I was thinking of doing it at the end of the presentation.
Just go ahead and pass them out.
Oh, okay. Sure, why don't we pass them out now?
While I'm introducing Armin, Armin Siedlecki is come all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, to talk about RDA. He has a Ph.D. in Old Testament from Emory University in Atlanta. In the past, he has taught courses in biblical studies and religious studies at Wilfrid Laurier University, got it right, in Waterloo, Ontario, the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, that's in Canada for those non-Canadians, Drury University in Springfield, Missouri, and Emory University. He's been a cataloger at Pitt's Theology Library and Emory University since 2001, and the head of cataloging since 2007. He works primarily with German and Latin language materials, including the Pitt's Theology Library's German Reformation collection. He's an active member of the Society of Biblical Literature and of ATLA, where he's chair of the Technical Services Interest Group. During the RDA testing period last year, he served as chair of the RDA test group at Emory, which was one of the official test sites in the United States. So please give Armin a warm welcome as he brings relevant knowledge and practical hands-on experience with RDA to us, pertaining to the monumental moment in our library profession.
Thank you, Donna. And I would like to reiterate again, please do ask questions, and not only do I like it when people ask questions, I like being interrupted. So please feel free to interrupt. For those of you who were there this morning, there will be a little bit of overlap with our presentation this morning, especially when I talk about fervor, but most of it should not overlap with what we've done this morning. This presentation is geared to people beyond cataloging. It should be of interest to catalogers, I think, but also to people beyond cataloging. I will try to stay away from marquees if I can. If I should slip, this would be a good time to interrupt and remind me. So resource description and access, RDA. It's the new cataloging standard. And just to contextualize why people are talking about this, let me open with a couple of library cliches. You've probably all heard things like, everything's online now, or I can find everything I need on Google. And my favorite, the library is dead. It's not used quite as much anymore, but I know a few years ago this was sort of a big buzzword. We really don't need libraries anymore. Everything is online. Everything should be digitized and accessible to everybody. Obviously, this is a little threatening to people like me, probably to everyone here in the room. But I would also say that I don't believe that the library is in fact dead. Libraries obviously are changing, but I do think that we have a very important role to play. And in fact, more recent studies have shown that library usage has actually increased rather than decreased. This applies to both public libraries as well as academic libraries. So we're alive and well. However, I did want to include this quote from an article called "The Library is Dead, Long Live the Library," which I think is quite appropriate. The internet has made a significant shift in the environment in which libraries find themselves, and is making our professional assumptions seem as foreign as a medieval manuscript in chains. Well, that's stretching it a bit, I think. I don't think that the disconnect is quite as big as to medieval manuscripts in chains, but I think there can be very little doubt that the world in which we live and work and function is, in fact, very different. Users are changing. There's much more emphasis on interactive learning. Research is done almost exclusively online. How many of you still have a card catalog? And how many users still use it? We have still a card catalog which contains some information about some backlog material, long backlog material in our library, and I am quite sure that most users at my institution don't even know about this, and that includes faculty. Really, research is done almost exclusively online. Not all the resources, of course, but finding the resources. And search behavior is influenced by internet usage. I think that can hardly be denied. I chuckled when I put up everything's on Google now, but I think there can be very little doubt that Google has changed the way people look at finding and retrieving information. My institution is currently in the process of migrating ILSs, and yeah, not a lot of fun. But one of the vendors that came to our campus, I'm not going to name names, but one of the vendors that came to our campus began a presentation focusing for almost 10 minutes on that point. And at the end, I couldn't help but feel it's like, well, can we assume just for a moment that not every user is an illiterate imbecile? Some users are in fact quite sophisticated. I think that's true, sir, hopefully for most academic libraries. I would like to think that of our users. So I don't want to overstress this point. However, I do want to also mention that most studies have shown that users don't often look at the second or third page of search results. And again, that is one of the direct influences that has come to us courtesy of Google. If it's on the first page, this is great, this is what I'm looking for, I don't really want to look much further. Some library systems have responded by including features like relevance ranking, and that helps a little bit. But again, as with anything, there are pluses and minuses to that. Libraries are changing. That didn't change. My slides aren't though. Okay. Libraries are changing. The physical environment of libraries is changing. One of the things that users request most frequently recently is interactive study spaces. The idea of a library as a quiet place where people go, sit down, and do not want to be bothered really has changed. Obviously, it's still important to have such places, but study spaces have become almost equally important and very important challenge for any library today. They've become more like learning centers, more emphasis on reference consultation, and very importantly, we have a much more diverse media in our collections. Not just books, DVDs, CDs, audio, online materials, microfiche still linger on, which is actually a good thing because a server can crash, but to read a microfiche, really all you need is a candle and a magnifying glass. From a perspective of preserving material, I hate cataloging microfiche, but I'm glad they exist, and I do hope that they'll stick around. I think they definitely have their place. And some new discovery systems have been introduced. Many libraries have experimented or have incorporated discovery systems like Primo or Endeca, either in place of their catalog or more frequently sitting on top of their catalog systems, allowing users to conduct different types of searches and getting to the information somewhat differently. Getting back to the point of more diverse media, and also to, I mentioned that my institution is currently migrating ILSs. Much of our discussions currently are about figuring out the proper conversion specifics. How does the data that we have in our current system translate correctly to the new system? And for print media, that seems to work very well. Most of our discussions are about things like those 3 laptops we have in our collection, which we can check out to users. How do we catalog them properly? And how do we identify them? How do we put in proper hooks in the record so that we can find them later if something doesn't quite translate? And I couldn't help thinking in all these discussions, this would actually be a lot easier with RDA. And I think it would be, but also data is changing. There's an integration of bibliographic data with the wider internet environment, although much of our data in library catalogs is still largely hidden from the internet. One of the things envisioned by the people who developed RDA was to make it more available, to develop a greater web presence for library catalogs. There's definitely a move from the individual library to an international audience. When we create an original record now, we don't just create it locally, but we know that people in Switzerland may actually use the marked record that we wrote, or in Chicago, or in Venezuela, or whatever. It's a much more international environment. Catalogs are no longer working in isolation. There's global access to data. A good example of that is the virtual international authority file. If you're a cataloger, you've probably used it, or if you haven't, I would encourage you to take a look at it. It's wonderful. It incorporates data like the authority file from the Library of Congress, but also from other national libraries. If you're trying to find the identity of a particular author, especially if it's an obscure author, this is really a great place to turn for biographical information. IF.org. And all these slides will be available, so that link should work if you access those slides. Now, with all these changes, catalogs are also changing. There are new possibilities for including more data. We are no longer limited to a card catalog card, a little 3x5 card. That has certainly changed. There are new possibilities for complex searches. There are new possibilities for presenting search results. None of these things are radically new. In fact, they've been around for quite some time now. But the cataloging rules have not really caught up with that change in environment, I think. The cataloging rules that we are using, AACR2, were still developed with the card catalog card in mind, and do not really take full advantage of these new possibilities, which, well, I mean, this is why people turn to Google rather than library catalogs, because complex searches can be done much more easily, much more quickly in many cases. So one case I'd like to make is if we don't want to lose out to Google, we need to change the way the way we do things just a little bit, or at least adapt to the possibilities that we have. Now, with all this in mind, these were all motivating factors for RDA, resource description and access. This is the official logo that you'll see on the RDA toolkit. RDA is the successor to AACR2, Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, number 2, but it's not AACR3. In fact, it's quite different from what AACR3 would look like. Because the change is not just more material or a little refinement of descriptions needed for a particular material, but we're working in a very different kind of environment. We're describing different materials, and we construct records in a different environment. All of us work in online environment. Really simply expanding or doing some modifications to AACR2 would probably not be quite enough. There was one webinar I attended where a person used an interesting slide of a architectural structure saying, okay, this is AACR2. If you want to incorporate changes, you can start building on it more and more, or you can break the whole thing down and build a new structure. This is what AACR2, what RDA is supposed to do. It deconstructs the elements and reassembles them in ways that are more appropriate for a multimedia environment. So what's wrong with AACR2? This is a list from Ann Chapman at UConn. One of the problems was it was increasingly complex. Now, people have often said that RDA is more complex than it needs to be. Yes, AACR2 was complex, but preserved the information in a linear form, in a linear presentation. This is not the best way to present complex information. AACR2 was constantly catching up with new formats and publishing practices. Again, any additions, you really ended up with a bit of a patchwork. It didn't have a very logical structure. All the information was presented in a format by chapter type of arrangement. It mixed some categories. It mixed information about content and carrier. A text can be in print, it can be online, it can be on microfiche. An audio CD or a CD can contain audio material, it can contain images, it can contain, this is all the same carrier, can contain text, music, films. You see, for every carrier you have a variety of different content options, and for every content you have a variety of different carrier options. And so it's important when we construct our data, when we organize our data, that we are clear what we are talking about. What exactly is it that we're describing? What is the content and what is the carrier? AACR2 was not terribly successful, probably because, well, when AACR2 was written, I don't think that the situation that we're in now could really be foreseen. Hierarchical relationships are missing in AACR2, and also it has a very strong Anglo-American centric viewpoint. Obviously, they're the Anglo-American cataloging rules. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We work in an Anglo-American context, or at least I do, and I believe probably everybody here does, we create English language records. But as I mentioned earlier, our catalogs are no longer in isolation. Other people consult our catalogs, people abroad consult our catalogs. I'm sure there's a good percentage of international students at any of your institutions. AACR2 was written before Ferber, and I'll get to Ferber in a little bit. There's not enough support for collocation, and there's often an uneasy or unclear relationship with the MARC format. Now, the same is true for RDA. RDA is not contingent on MARC at all. However, AACR2 presupposes MARC without actually telling you how these correlations work. RDA, on the other hand, is independent of MARC. Although it is used with MARC, it is not necessarily dependent on it, but can exist in different formats: Dublin Core, mods, DAX, other metadata structures. Just to talk a little bit more about the international context, RDA was based on international models developed and principles developed by IFLA. That includes the functional requirements for bibliographic records, first published in 1998, Ferber. Functional requirements for authority data, FRAD, published in 2009. And also the Statement of International Cataloging Principles, ICP. So a number of international standards have been developed, and again, the data in a French language record will be different from the data in an English language record, or will be presented somewhat differently. The set of pages with the French word for pages, I forgot right now, but it doesn't matter. But those are those details, notwithstanding, the rules of description that RDA is based on should be international and should apply to catalogs no matter what language they function. Key principles from the international cataloging principles in RDA. The key principle is convenience of the user. And I think this is very, very central. That's why I put it first. This is something that is stressed in ICP and something that is very much emphasized and stressed in RDA. If you cannot justify a rule or a practice by appealing to this principle, the convenience of the user, it is not what we should be doing. Specifically, the user's participation in finding information this is another great acronym, FISO, cited: find, identify, select, and obtain. It is assumed that this is what the user is primarily interested in: to find a resource, identify the correct resource, select it, and obtain it. I don't think that the user's participation was addressed or is addressed at all in AACR2. So it is nice to see that participation of the user included in RDA. Some people have criticized this for being too narrow. It doesn't include navigation, for example. A good case can be made for that, but I think it's a pretty solid starting point. Another key principle that RDA takes from the international cataloging principles is representation. The transcription of data in particular. The main rule here is take what you see. No abbreviations, no corrections, or I shouldn't say no corrections, but corrections are recorded elsewhere. If the title of a book is misspelled on the title page, in the main title statement, we will record it as it is misspelled on the title page, and then offer an alternative title statement with the corrected version of the title, in addition to it. It is designed to remove ambiguities. This is designed to remove ambiguities. How should we best abbreviate? What is the best way? I was just talking to somebody right before this presentation, and it's like, well, if you're identifying a place of publication, for example, what do you use? Do you use the old 4-letter designation for the state, or the more current postal 2-letter abbreviation? Do you spell it out? RDA is fairly clear on that. You take what you see. If the title page says Tulsa, Oklahoma, you say Tulsa, Oklahoma. If the title page says Tulsa, OK, you say Tulsa, OK. It also should facilitate machine-readable workflows. So resources can be scanned and then manipulated by a cataloger rather than fully described by hand. This can be a time saver. It's something that I believe publishers are more interested in than catalogers, but something to be aware of, and I think something that is a reality and something that should at least be acknowledged. And if we take what we see, there really is no ambiguity. The machine can read, or the scanning software can read whatever is on the page and use that, and would not be contradicting any rules in doing so. So what is RDA? A content standard. I've underlined it here. This is really quite crucial. It is not a display standard, as was AACR2, although LC will continue to use ISBD punctuation and AACR2 style for access points. For most of us, records won't look all that different from the way they looked before, because we will continue to use the same display standards, but they're not defined as rules in RDA. This is not what RDA is concerned with. RDA is concerned with content, not with display. Also, it is not an encoding standard. It can be used with Mark 21, with Dublin Core, with mods, as I mentioned, and it should make conversion to different schemas easier. This is one way in which library data could be made more available to the wider web. The wider web doesn't really speak Mark. They don't speak the language that we use. To transform or to make our data more transferable to different encoding standards provides a greater possibility for making our data available to a much wider audience. LC will continue to use Mark 21. When we did the test last year, the RDA test, all of the records in the common set that Library of Congress asked us to do were done in Mark 21. Were done based on Mark 21. Yes?
I know you've had some training with the Library of Congress, so do you kind of have a sense of their commitment to Mark 21, or are they thinking about transitioning to a different data structure? Do you have any feelings from them on that? Or?
I know there are some people who are very excited about different structures. Diane Hillman has talked about this in particular. I don't see any change happening anytime soon. But I think when that change, or if and when that change should happen down the road, and I really don't see it happening in the next 10 years. But it should make the transition easier and less complicated. The records, the data would be more transferable. And you could have different schemas coexisting at the same time. As well. But yeah, I don't see Mark going away quite yet, not in the next few years. And who knows what the future will bring, but and I know there are some people excited about the possibilities that different schemas offer. RDA has a wider scope of resources. This is a response to what is being acquired in libraries. There are more elements for non-printed text resources, more elements for non-text resources, more elements for unpublished resources. One of the members of our testing group at Emory was an archivist who I think was quite hesitant at first about RDA. Somewhat suspicious, but ended up liking it quite a bit. So, for somebody working with DAX in archives, or CCO, if you work for a museum, or DCRMB, which is one standard that I work with a good deal, the descriptive cataloging of rare materials and books. This should really be quite readily adaptable and usable. And there's a new orientation from classes of materials to elements and values, more controlled vocabularies. Elements and values can go cross classes of materials, of course, can be used in different classes of materials. So rather than describing a number of classes of materials and formats separately, it is more important to describe the elements and the values, and then adapt it to the particular format that you're talking about, or content carrier, I should say. So these are some of the things that, some of the advantages, I think, of RDA. Another advantage is the continuity with AACR2. I know I gave you a slide before telling you what's wrong with AACR2. The nice thing is our day-to-day work in cataloging, it will undoubtedly change if and when RDA is adopted. However, there's also a good deal of continuity. It is not something that you have to learn completely new. It's not like you have to learn how to program in XML, for example, which would be much more intimidating, I think. The data, and this is actually specified in RDA, the data should be amenable to integration into existing databases, particularly those developed using AACR and related standards. So RDA itself is set up in such a way as to present minimal disruption.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
Is this a possible source of, retaining complexity that might otherwise have been simplified? We do, for example, quite a bit of non-mark metadata, and we work outside of any of the existing library tools, but actually it's much simpler because we don't have to take account of all the legacy ways in which people may have entered data in the past and ways the systems are designed to handle that type of data. Do you see this as a concession that is there for practical reasons, or do you think this was something that really had to be done?
A bit of both. I think to some extent it's a concession, also acknowledging that we have millions of AACR2 records, AACR2 mark records in OCLC. It is simply not realistic to expect all of those to be converted within our lifetime, certainly. It's simply not feasible. So I think it's a realistic concession to some extent. But I think RDA, I say AACR2, this is not a Freudian slip. RDA lays the groundwork, I think, for data as it is being constructed now and into the future. But both standards should be able to exist side by side with minimal disruption to the user. So it's more, where do we go from here? Let's start doing things somewhat differently, but do it in such a way so as not to make what we've done so far completely irrelevant. That's how I see it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I mean, I probably have thoughts about it, but that's very helpful, thank you.
Yes.
Maybe you'll talk about this later, but you talked about the new possibilities to include more data, and at the same time, RDA was supposed to simplify things because it's supposed to help people who are not full-time professional ACR2 catalogers. So people could understand, because there's a bigger pool of catalogers with various levels of training or understanding. My question is, with your testing period, is it actually simplified, and will it take less time to catalog? Once you learn how, once you're familiar with the RDA?
That's a good question. Obviously, there will be some adjustment, and the first few RDA records I created took me longer than the ACR2 records because it was a new standard. I was getting used to new rules, obviously. Down the road, I don't see a huge difference in time. I think careful cataloging, no matter what standard it's done in, will take the time it takes. So I don't see a lot of difference. I don't think it'll take a lot more. I don't think it'll take a lot less time to create a record. It allows for more possibilities to integrate the complexities of the materials we catalog. And I think finding information in RDA is faster than finding information in AACR2. I like the RDA toolkit. I did find that finding information in RDA was very fast, very efficient. So I was encouraged by that. That was one of the things I liked. Yeah, I mentioned no change to change. No need to change legacy data on a one-by-one basis, which again would not be realistic and would not be feasible. To illustrate this, I'll give you two screenshots. This was actually taken from the test. This was a record that was part of the common set that Library of Congress had asked us to catalog. It was an edition of the Gospel of John. And we have one AACR2 record and one RDA record, and as both appear in our OPAC at Emory University, in the default display, not the full display, but the default display for the user. Can you tell which is which? You can, but would most users be able to tell the difference?
And I don't know if they care.
Right. That's right. The display, I think, will be minimally disruptive. It offers different possibilities for searching, but I think the actual display will be very, very similar, which is why you can have RDA and AACR2 records in the same database. Yes?
I noticed on AutoCAD that people seem to get very, very upset about small details. And I think one of the reasons I'm not is, being in a theological library, we have a lot of older bibliographic records anyway that are pre-AACR2 that look, slightly different. So the idea that having a new, slightly different record just doesn't bother me at all. Where some libraries, I guess, have pristine AACR2 cataloging, and for them, they just seem very unhappy. but we have such older materials and a variety of records. It doesn't it doesn't bother me at all as a cataloger. The slight differences. But anyway, just a thought.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I actually feel the same way.
Yeah.
Like I said, I do a lot of DCR&B cataloging, which, again, is also slightly different from AACR2. And all these records can function quite well next to each other. Most users will not notice the difference very much. Other rare book catalogers, and in my case for DCR&B, will appreciate some of the information I include there. And people who don't know what to do with that information really will care. Yeah. Yes?
My assumption is that it's the upper record. The top record is the RDA record, and the lower one is the AACR2.
That's correct.
And the reason I distinguish it is because New Testament NT is still being used in Uniform Title, whereas that's disappeared in RDA.
That's right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's right. There are no more testaments before Bible books
Okay.
with RDA. Also, another difference is under physical description, it's 63 pages instead of 63p.
Ah, okay. Right, because you can spell it out now.
Right. Yeah,
It's no longer for a card.
Exactly. Yeah. CM, centimeters, is still abbreviated because it is seen as a symbol. It is not an abbreviation, but it is a symbolic designation for centimeters. That's why it's also represented with, well, it is represented with a period here because it ends the field.
Right.
But if more information were to follow, there would be no period. It would be CM without the period. So that explains what looks like an abbreviation. It looks like an abbreviation. It's really not, though. But I think you were first.
I'm wondering about the title. The subtitle has a capital A in the first one and lowercase in the second. I don't know if that's relevant or, and you said you take what you see in the book, but these are probably all capitalized on the title page. So that's not true for the title?
I am not sure if they were all capitalized on the title page. But again, because RDA is not a display standard, it won't affect searching. The A was probably capitalized.
But on a title page, probably more than just the A would be capitalized. Probably all of those words, right, would have been capitalized. I mean, except for the A and
Right.
untitled page. So you don't actually, like you said, the abbreviation for a state, so
Right.
you do it however
Right.
it appears, but the capitalization is not.
Well, abbreviations concern the content. Capitalization is a display question. And that is not addressed in RDA because it's a content standard, not a display standard. But the capitalization rules for RDA cataloging will be largely the same as with AACR2 cataloging. Or the decision by the Library of Congress was, last I knew, to maintain the same rules. So, yeah. Good point. Yes?
This may be the same answer, the fact that it's not a display standard. I was just wondering if it were an electronic book, where would that display? Or you're going to say it's not a display standard, so that's not a question for RDA. I'm not a catalog.
Well, it is, because that relates to the carrier. That relates very much to the data that we're trying to capture. If it is an electronic book in the AACR2 record, you would have delimiter age electronic resource in square brackets here, which would interrupt the title statement. In RDA, you would not have this. You would have, under physical description, online resource, and then you would have 3 fields that would specify the exact nature of the online resource, of the content, the medium, and the carrier. Those fields in our OPAC default view were not visible to the patron because they don't mean much to the patron. But
Yes, they do. Yeah. And in a lot of the series.
well, not the codes that are used in those particular fields.
Oh, the code.
Right, the codes would not.
But it would display as electronic resource in that physical description.
Yes, yeah. Yes, that definitely would. The additional fields which would be used for coding would not, or it depends on how you configure your system, but would not necessarily, it wouldn't in this particular case, but it would definitely distinguish the individual. Yes?
What happens to such details such as the table of contents in RDA?
It can be included. It is not core, but it can be included. There are no limits to what you can include. Subject headings are not core, and for the test, we did not add any subject headings.
So then will it not, like if you don't include the subject headings, will it not get displayed? Or
Oh no, they'll get displayed.
just so?
Yeah, and that also depends more on your system than anything. Yeah. If your system is set up to display subject headings, which I think pretty much every system is, it would display subject headings. But subject headings are not a core requirement for an RDA record. A record can be complete without subject headings. People who catalog a lot of fiction usually don't include subject headings. For example, the table of contents would not be core. The record would be complete without that information, but it certainly can be added. There's nothing in RDA that would prevent you from doing that. question. These would be additional fields that would be added to a MARC record, and this is one of the few instances where I will slip into a little bit of marquise. The content type would be specified in a field with the tag number 336, and it would be something like notated music, performed music, sounds, spoken word, text, still image, two-dimensional moving image. These are controlled vocabularies. The media type would be specified audio, computer, microform, projected, or unmediated. So for a printed resource, the media type would be unmediated, because the printed page is not mediated. You look at it. Again, this would not mean much to a patron, so which is why it wouldn't display in the OPAC, in most OPACs. We wouldn't need to display. Carrier type audio disc online resource. Now, what is hoped is that these contents and carrier, content medium and carrier type informations can be represented in your OPAC, for example, by icons. If you have a text that is unmediated, and that combines two types of information, text from content, unmediated from media, you could have a little icon of a book next to that record. If you have the same resource in an online format, it would also be text, but it would be computer. The media type would be computer. You could have a little computer screen or whatever your library would choose to have as an icon to represent online resources. But that's really, that goes beyond the record itself. This is not the catalog, but this is what the system could do with it, and these are some of the possibilities. In a MARC record, a book, for example, would look like this, 238 pages, text unmediated in volume. This specifies the resource where the control vocabulary is taken from. Again, if you're a cataloger, this will be relevant to you. If you're not a cataloger, you probably won't care about it, but your system will care about it, and that's what's important. For a print serial, text unmediated volume, much like a book in that case.
So the idea behind this is allows for greater flexibility in rapidly changing media and having new definitions for something we don't know exists yet.
Yeah, possibly. But yeah, it allows for a better breakdown. Like I said, a text can be printed, or it can be online, or it can be on a microfiche. It would all be a text resource. This allows for a more granular breakdown of the nature of the resource that you're dealing with. More relevant to systems than to catalogers, but it allows for greater specificity. Yeah, this was one of the examples. This was, I took these screenshots from our discovery system. We use Ex Libris Primo, which makes use of some icons. If you're looking for St. Augustine's Confessions, for example, there's an audio resource, a book, an online book, and a printed book. Printed book and an online book, all represented by 3 different icons. This is not an RDA system. This is not an RDA system, but this is a system that makes use of some of the same resources. And this would be helpful, I would hope, and visually appealing perhaps to a user. Sorry, there it is. Yes, this is saying the same thing. As systems incorporate RDA, they can take the coded information and display the information as icons or as useful facets to filter searches or to show the user availability for each carrier. things that are specifically relevant to theological libraries. As you had pointed out earlier, the testaments have disappeared. If we have a book that deals with the Old Testament, it would be Bible Old Testament instead of Bible OT. Or if we have a book on the book of Genesis, it would be Bible Genesis instead of Bible OT Genesis. So OT and NT have disappeared and are represented by Old Testament and New Testament only if we have books that deal with the Testament rather than books within that Testament. But in either case, it would be spelled out. Let me spend a little bit of time talking about Ferber and Frad. Ferber is the functional requirements for bibliographic records. Frad are the functional requirements for authority data, and they constitute the conceptual foundation underlying RDA. A third standard for subject data, FRSAD, never written down here. Couldn't remember the acronym this morning. Functional requirements for subject authority data, I guess, FRSAD, FRSAD, is currently being developed by an IFLA working group and will be added to RDA when it becomes available. It should be within the next year or two. So these describe two of the three major entities that RDA is concerned with. Works, let me return to the entities later. I'll get to that when we talk about individual components. Those of you who were in the presentation this morning saw this slide also this morning. I was going too fast. Sorry. WEMI, work, expression, manifestation, and item. It's the basic structural architecture of Ferber. Ferber presents information hierarchically, broken down by work. Sorry about that. The S is with Augustine's Confessions. The work would be Augustine's Confession. It's a very abstract concept, a very abstract, almost Platonic idea. Different expressions of that work would be an English version of Confessions, a German translation of the Confessions, or a critical edition of the Latin Confessiones, the original language. Another expression would also be an audio recording of the Confessions. Then manifestations is what catalogers have been cataloging for the past few years. It is what is issued by a publisher. A Penguin Classics edition of the Confessions. Actually, the audio recording should have gone into expression. Sorry. Or different publications of the critical edition would be different manifestations. The item, finally, is the actual physical thing you can hold in your hand. The book on the shelf or the DVD in your media center. Does that make sense? I know those of you who were in the presentation this morning saw this already, and we talked a little bit about this. Most of the ambiguities in this exist around expression, what distinguishes an expression and a work. And there can be some confusion about that, and that, yes?
Well, sorry.
No.
The question I have is, how does this map into the legal intellectual property framework for books? For example, are librarians getting into a dangerous territory when we are saying something is a work and associating something as in a sense an expression of it that may legally not be classified as a derivative work of that original work? For example, like this example of someone who And you know, it was a matter of legal dispute whether this could be considered a derivative or an independent work. Now, from a Ferber perspective, I don't think that would be a discussion at all. But I'm worried about librarians stepping into actual legal issues by associating things and saying, here in our catalog, we have made the determination this is an expression of something that's really a Platonic work. And I wonder if that's been discussed at the level of people working on Ferber and the way that librarians may enter into that discussion.
Well, there are ambiguities, and actually on the next slide that'll become even clearer. One of the examples let me just put it up. One of the examples I used there for the Gospel of Matthew is Pier Pasolini's movie, the Gospel of Matthew, Vangelo secondo Matteo, which I would classify as a work because it is a movie adaptation of the Gospel of Matthew. However, we talked a little bit about this morning, so for those of you who were there, it contains the exact text of the Gospel of Matthew in its Italian translation. No more, no less. So it doesn't add dramatic speeches. It doesn't edit elements out. Every word that is in the Italian translation of the Gospel of Matthew is, in fact, in Pasolini's movie. It becomes a judgment call at this point. I'm not sure if this would border on legal.
Well, I guess the issue is it could become a matter of evidence in a court. For example, if librarians say this is an expression of this work, that's actually what's at issue in a legal dispute. And that, in my view, could become a form of evidence that librarians, working very practically from the sense of users, of course, Wind Undone is an expression of the Gone with the Wind in the Platonic sense. But should we be thinking about this? Should we be doing that kind of? Or this hasn't been integrated, I guess, is the question with the legal framework for derivative works.
A good question. It's not an issue that I've thought about a lot, or that. I'm sure questions will arise.
Maybe we can talk about it afterwards. I'd like to pursue that if you have any suggestions.
I guess it could be evidence. The library record could be evidence. I'm not sure if it would be legally binding evidence. I mean, we catalog resources.
But we're doing something different in the sense that this, to my mind, is a novel element. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a cataloger, but this interpretation of whether something is an expression of a work, to me, is a new element in cataloging. Is that right?
That's right.
And so I think it's an interesting new territory for catalogers to be going into, and it may bring us into dialogue with people that we hadn't expected to be in dialogue.
To further illustrate the complexities of our work, yes. I never considered being subpoenaed in creating catalog records, but that is an interesting point. I definitely would like to think more about that and to look into that. But that is a good point. Thank you. Interesting. There will be certainly some differences in opinion. Some people might consider something an expression of a work, or might consider it a work in its own right, independently of that. And I don't think that there ever will be 100% consistency in the application of those principles, but it's the larger structure. And again, the details, I'm sure, will be discussed on the listservs.
Do you think if I'm a regular patron off the street that I'll have to understand this work expression manifestation item?
No. No, I don't think that a patron would need to understand this. I think it's the way we can organize the information to make it accessible to the patron. But I don't think that even reference librarians would have to think about to know that your library organizes information in this way. And it would enable you to help a user to find information better. But the user, him or herself, should not be expected. It goes back to the four principles of the user's involvement: find, identify, select, and obtain. I don't think that requires an understanding of Ferber. Hopefully our librarians, our catalogers, and our systems will be able to do that. A good point. There are three groups of entities. There are products of intellectual or artistic endeavor, work, expression, manifestation, and item, the ones we've talked about. There are those responsible for the intellectual or artistic content, physical production and dissemination, or the custodianship of the entities in the first group, author, editor, translator, illustrator, any person or group associated with the product of intellectual or artistic endeavor and subjects. So basically, author, title, subject, to break it down for a straightforward book. But obviously, in many cases, things are more complex. If you're a music cataloger, for example, who was the author of The Magic Flute? Mozart, yes. Well, the music. Schikaneder wrote the libretto. Most users today would be interested in finding Mozart, or it's Mozart's Magic Flute. We don't think of the librettist. In fact, few people would know the librettist. But yeah, so those would be those responsible for the intellectual or artistic content. In a record for the Magic Flute, it would be, both should be given. I'm not a music cataloger, but I would assume that Mozart would be given as the main entry.
He would be.
Magic Flute, I would think so. Yeah, you've done a lot of music catalog. Thank you.
But if it was just a libretto, then it would be the guy who wrote the libretto.
Right, if you have the score. Well, the score would be Mozart, that's right, but just the libretto, that's right. Yeah, because Mozart's contribution would not be represented in this. Good point. It's about relationships. These elements, the works of an artistic endeavor, those who contribute to its creation or preservation or translation, and the subjects relating to it. What RDA is mostly concerned with are the relationships between these three elements or element groups. And I've had this diagram up this morning as well. We have group 1 entities, which are work, expression, manifestation, and item. Those are the works of artistic endeavor. We have the people responsible for them as group 2 entities, and group 3 entities down here, subjects that describe or that provide access points for the user about these resources. It looks complicated. I don't actually think it is all that complicated, but I think it captures the complexity of the situation quite well. What the user is interested in, rather than understanding Ferber, I think, would be to enter the structure at any given point and see connections and see where the user can navigate from any given point. If the user finds information about a manifestation, you want to find some information about the people associated with it, about items that are available by it, what is it an expression of? So even though this diagram as a whole looks fairly complicated, each individual component, I think, is an entry point for a user. And each individual component has a number of connections. And I think this is what a user is interested in. The user probably wouldn't put it in those terms. But it's an interesting way, I think, for us to think about the way we organize our information for the benefit of the user. The next few slides were developed by Gordon Dunsire at the University of Strathclyde. They were used by Barbara Tillett in a plenary address at last year's ATLA meeting in Louisville, Kentucky. I could have found no better way of representing this. I took the slides that Barbara Tillett had used. I figure if Barbara Tillett from the Library of Congress can use them, I can too. I hope the graphics work out well. What we have here is a flat file bib record, the sort of thing you would find on a library card, in a card catalog, including the hole in the bottom. That was a cute little extra. To represent this in MARC format, and sorry, this box actually should be around the whole thing. I'm not trying to single out spoken word. To represent the information in MARC format would look something like this. You'd have 100, the author field, Lee cataloging as a future, one sound disc, spoken word donated by the author, and the subject is metadata. And then your OPAC can display it in different ways, however your OPAC is configured. This would be a very basic AACR2 way of representing it. With some systems, even today, with some systems, even today, the authority data is actually stored in an authority record. And subject terms sorry, some of those boxes did not break down. It looked fine when I looked at it on my computer at home. Didn't transfer well to my netbook, I guess. Sorry about that. And subject authority records are presented contained in different records as well. Item information could be contained differently. Item level data, such as provenance of a particular item, is different information. Manifestation information really belongs to a different category. Cataloging as a future carrier type audio disc. Expression information is spoken word. Title of the work cataloging as a future. Future record would look something like this. This is not the way an RDA record would look like now, but you could have an authority record which would then link to this record and enter a, for example, identifier number which would display in your OPAC to the user as the author Lee TB. In other words, you wouldn't even include the author's name in the record that the cataloger would see, but only a link to the authority record directly. The nice thing about that is, if any information should change, you wouldn't have to change every record that this author is associated with, but global changes would be instantaneous. The authority record would change, and the information in the bib record would change automatically, which I think is actually quite nice. Same with subject headings. Subject headings do change. Terminology changes, usage changes. Again, any change would be applied instantaneously if the subject authority record is changed. Again, this is not the way an RDA record constructed today would look like, but these are some of the possibilities. You take the components in the bib record, break them apart and specify what relates to the manifestation, what relates to the expression, what relates to the specific item. And again, this is also something that's being talked about, the RDA content type registry, spoken word. All of these could be contained in different types of registries. It's a different way of preserving the elements in different metadata structures.
In your testing period, is that how you, you mentioned not exactly saying Lee TB, but an authority record number that ties into it? Is that how you guys did it?
No.
Okay.
No, we did not. We did not. There are some European libraries that do that now. We did not do that. We used, in fact, authorized headings from the LC authority file for the test. So, yeah, this is not the way an RDA record would look like now, but this is sort of pointing to what can be done in the future if you break apart the different elements, put it into different compartments that are coded differently by metadata standards, including MARC. MARC could be applied to this, but it's a way of separating out the different components. Does that make sense? Different way of representing this linked data. Again, you would have the authority record linked into the information keyword from an authority file. This is essentially the same as before with just the red arrows. Visually, this didn't come quite across as well as I had hoped, so I apologize for that. Largely because the boxes are all out of place. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but yeah. So let me just store it differently. This is where it's entered. This could be a time saver also for cataloging, because you wouldn't be transcribing the information for each individual record. You would enter a link to the authority record or to relevant authority registries, which would then populate your record. It would ensure consistency and could potentially be a time saver. And you can package it for display. CD next to it. Some more advantage, and I've talked about some of these already. It can make hidden data available by being more easily transferable to other encoding schemas. RDA data or bibliographic data in our catalogs could be made available more easily to other computer systems. Currently, online catalogs are closed databases. There's an abundance of metadata, and it's virtually invisible to web search engines. In fact, some ILSs cannot even make full use of MARC data. Accessing RDA. There's the print edition. It's $150. It's virtually unreadable. And it's not intended to be read. When I talked about it this morning, I hear about people who want to read RDA. And when I talked about it this morning, I used the example of a phone book. You move to a different city, You pick up a phone book because you want to be able to find the phone number. You don't have to read the phone book from cover to cover in order to use the phone book. You just have to be able to find the information contained in the phone book. RDA is much the same way. You don't want to buy RDA so you can read it and study it. It would have soporific effects, I'm sure. But the online toolkit is the other way of accessing it. It's a subscription based on the number of consecutive users. There are different pay structures. To get the subscription prices, you can go to access rdatoolkit.org. And that really is the way to access RDA. This morning I showed a couple of screenshots of RDA and how it's structured, and we'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow for those who are in the RDA workshop. But what I did want to do is spend a little bit of time on the RDA test, the test that we did at Emory University. Just some reflections on what we did and what we learned from it. The testing was done by the 3 national libraries, the Library of Congress, the National Library of Medicine, and the National Library of Agriculture, and 24 test partners, including Emory University, were in there, they're all down here somewhere, representing a range of cataloging system, a range of OPACs, a range of different formats and schemas. So it wasn't just libraries, I think there were a couple of vendors, 1 or 2 vendors as well, and types of materials and resources cataloged. Great effort had been made to make this group as diverse as possible. Something that I really quite appreciated. It was a very diverse group. What we did is we cataloged a common set of 25 original titles. These were given to us as what they called surrogates, photocopies of the title page, the verso, the half title, the cover, the spine, anything that would be relevant. It was scanned and sent to us in PDF files, so we didn't have the actual book, but as close as it gets, and what we need for what we needed for the test. And for each title given to us, for each work, manifestation, I should say. For each manifestation, each institution produced 2 original records. Descriptive elements only, no subject headings, no call numbers. For each title, 1 RDA record and 1 AACR2 record. RDA authority records were created locally if necessary, but were not posted to the national authority file. And some participating institutions created no authority records. Each cataloger, or each tester, cataloged at least 5 titles, but could not produce an RDA and an AACR2 record for the same title. I thought that was an interesting rule. You didn't want the same person producing both records for the same title. So if you cataloged, did the RDA record for the Gospel of John that I showed you earlier, which was among the set of 25 original titles, you could not also do the AACR2 record. And also 5 titles for copy cataloging were included. To be quite honest, I never totally saw the point of that, but I guess it's to see what it does to your OPAC, or to your system, however you did it. The common set consisted of these resources: 7 monographs, 1 multi-part monograph, 3 electronic publications, 2 print serials, 3 electronic serials. So you see, it's still the majority, or the greatest number of works still came from printed monographs, which, even though we collect a great variety of media now, it's still what most of us have most of. And it was still heavily weighted on that, but other than that, really a fairly wide variety of resources that were included. And the common set of 5 copy titles was a print serial, a PDF of the monograph, and 3 books. Again, sort of representative of what a copy cataloger could expect. In addition to that, testing institutions also produced an extra set, a minimum of 25 additional titles, selected by the testing institutions. These were actual books or actual works that we had as part of our workflows. So for a while, there were books that I would have cataloged for our catalog, and I cataloged them in RDA rather than AACR2, added them in RDA format to our catalog, and submitted the record as part of the extra set to Library of Congress for the test. This was done to reflect collection emphases and strengths of a particular training institution. I tried to do some Bibles or Bible-related titles. This was something they were interested in because they wanted to see how it breaks down. Obviously, the archivist in our group did some archives and so on. So it's where we did what we usually do, what we usually work with. Those were the extra ones we did. We even did a couple of mods and mads. Our metadata librarian produced a couple in XML format. I don't know much about that, so I won't say much about it, but it showed that RDA can be used independent of schema. So it wasn't just Mark 21. Mostly Mark, but not exclusively. We did produce a couple of XML encoded records. Then what we did as testers is we completed various questionnaires about our institutional background, who we are, what we've done. And in addition, for each record, each tester completed a survey, including questions about familiarity with cataloging this type of resource, the use of workflows in the RDA toolkit. It's a great resource that you'll find in the RDA toolkit, workflows. The coding or tagging scheme, Mark for most of them. The time spent creating the record, any difficulties in creating the record, time spent consulting others, and any authority work that was done in conjunction with this record. So this really broke it down. They wanted to know what did we do, what did we spend time on, what did we have to know for the test. And then there was a usage test. We set up a website with access to the RDA records and the AACR2 records that we did for the test, and invited users, reference librarians, some of our student assistants, preferably non-catalogers, to look at these records and to respond to them as users. We didn't actually get to see the results of those because they were asked to fill out a questionnaire, which was then submitted directly via SurveyMonkey to the Library of Congress. So I spoke to some of the usage testers, and most of the feedback I got was that, well, there really wasn't all that much difference. So again, minimal disruption at the user's end. Some reflections on the test. The feedback from the testers was generally positive. I thought the toolkit was well structured and really very usable. The mappings, which was one of the resources, allowed for an easy adaptation to Mark. Workflows were a helpful resource included in the toolkit. Those were some of the comments that we submitted to Library of Congress. Some of the things that we weren't entirely happy with, it could include more examples, especially, and perhaps ironically, for non-print resources, more examples could have been given. That would have been helpful. And also a little bit more specificity that should be non-print resources, not print resources, or non-print resources. One comment, and this was made by several testers actually, I didn't find this, but I know several other people did, that they found that the visual contrast of yellow and white was confusing with the toolkit. It's a visual thing, so this was part of our feedback, so I thought I would include it here as well. A couple of things where I really appreciated the RDA toolkit. Cataloging reproductions. it was significantly more straightforward with RDA. And it's something that we do increasingly, I think, as we make materials available online. We scan a lot of material that's in the public domain if it's requested by a user, and place PDF online for users. And to catalog those was much more straightforward with RDA. There's no reproduction node, no GMP in the main title field. There's still, I should mention, some ambiguity whether a publication should refer to an expression or to a manifestation. Specifically, what should be given in the publication field? Should it be when the resource was initially published or when the reproduction was made? Strictly following the rule, it should be when the reproduction was made, which was also the rule in AACR2, although the Library of Congress has ruled not to follow that rule. And they're currently debating whether they will also not follow that rule if RDA is adopted. Personally, I think following the principle of convenience of the user, most users are not interested when a scanned copy of a resource published in 1920 was made.
Yeah.
They don't care if it was scanned in 2010 or 2009. They're interested that this was published in 1920. But there's still some debate about that. That's one of the questions that's still being debated. Dissertations, this was another one that I found very helpful. There was much more granularity in descriptions, and it should allow for improved searchability. One of the questions that was raised this morning was if authority data can include more fields, such as gender, for example, would it be possible to search for all dissertations written by women at the University of Chicago in 2007? Interesting point. I can certainly see why a researcher would be interested in this kind of search. I'm not quite sure how that would be done, but there would be data structures in place that would allow for such a search, at least through the authority. Relator terms, and I realize we're, I think, at the end of our sessions. I've got another 5 minutes perhaps, if that's okay, or I can stop at this point and take questions, whatever your preference would be. Okay, all right, I'll keep on going. Relator terms, I wanted to bring this in because it was one of the more controversial elements of RDA. You have these relator terms and relationship information in subfields in 7xx fields to specify the relationship of a person or group to a work or expression, of a work or expression to another work or expression, or a person or group to another person or group. And this is where that information that you had raised earlier about what is an expression of a work, and this is where we might potentially enter some legal territory. That's interesting. It was also claimed that the relator terms could disrupt local indexing and or control of authorized headings. Again, that's more of a systems question. It's possible, but I do believe that the impact of that will be less disruptive than some people fear. I really don't see this being a huge, if you configure your system so as not to include these relator terms in the indexing of authorized headings, it really shouldn't create that much of a problem, I think. But I know some people were quite upset about it. I think a more interesting question, and I really hadn't thought about this before, was the legal implications about making decisions about how does this resource relate to another resource. Some are fairly straightforward. Was it Pride and Prejudice and Zombies? Like, well, yeah, they're really two separate words. It works, it's not. But for something like the one you mentioned, there certainly is greater ambiguity, and that would be an interesting point. Yeah, I'd like to follow that more closely. So where are we now? In December, the end of December, The test was completed. We submitted all our test data to the Library of Congress. March 31st, the test data was supposed to be evaluated and completed, and so we're expecting a decision by the Library of Congress in April of 2011. It hasn't come yet. But there are still deliberations whether to adopt RDA or not. The options are adopt RDA as is, accept RDA with changes, or do not adopt RDA at all. I don't see the latter happening. I think too much time and money has been invested in creating RDA, and even though some people are not entirely happy with it, I think the same would be true for any new standard. To go back to the drawing board and create an entirely new system, which would also leave some people unhappy, might not necessarily be the best way of using our resources. What I think will happen is that RDA will be accepted. There will be some changes, probably addressing some of the details. They could be easily incorporated into the online resource, into the RDA toolkit. I think hopefully more examples will be given. Hopefully more specificity will be added to non-print materials. Those are the changes I would like to see personally. And a couple of the questions that arose during the test, or questions like the legality of some relationships, will hopefully be addressed. But my own feeling is that it probably will be adopted. We have a couple of libraries that use it. Library of Congress is not currently producing RDA records. There are several libraries that are producing them. University of Chicago, obviously a major research library. Brigham Young University, another major research library. State Library of Pennsylvania, Harrisburg. They are using or cataloging everything in RDA. In fact, yes?
This is probably a question I should ask before. Did the test records go into the OCLC database?
The test records for the extra set, yes, they did. The test records for the common set, no. Because then you would end up with 25 RDA records for the same resource. What we did there is one sort of dummy record was set up, which was then adapted, and we created the institutional records for each of them. Those were submitted. So they are available as institutional records, but not as master records.
Oh, okay.
And then for the extra set, we did create OCLC records. And where do we go from here? I think some of the advantages, again, pointing to the future, some of the advantages of RDA will be realized more fully going forward. The bibliographic data resides in separate packages. This was what I tried to show with that animated slide, which didn't work quite as well. I think this could be very interesting for catalogers. When access points can be assembled on the fly, when data for works and expressions can be reused for multiple manifestations. Again, this relates really to the first point, authority and bibliographic data resides in separate packages. Data would simply populate records. If we're talking about a different manifestation of the same record, it would be a different way of deriving a record, so to speak, cataloging a new manifestation. And when ILS vendors have developed systems that can make more full use of the Ferber FRAD environment, they're sitting by, they're waiting to see what Library of Congress says, so they haven't put a lot of their resources into developing RDA compatible systems, but I'm sure they will ask or act, at least I hope, I'm sure they will act quite fast once the decision is made. So, this is where we are. Any other questions? Yes?
you're talking about one of the benefits of RDA is less dark data, hidden data. How does RDA make it more accessible or visible?
If we contain the information in MARC records, it won't make it more accessible. However, because it's not tied to a particular encoding standard, the same information could be transferred to a different encoding standard, XML for example. It would be more accessible, or it could be made accessible. The problem is that a lot of systems do not speak MARC. A lot of systems outside of the library world don't speak MARC and cannot make use of that data. But if the information is encoded differently, it could be made available.
Okay.
Again, this is not the sort of thing that will happen once we start using RDA, but this is one of the advantages I think that could come in the future. Yes?
Will other fields, do you think other fields will eventually be made searchable? Like, will they be made access points in the future, or is what is set?
I think that is definitely a possibility. I think
I'm thinking from my experience cataloging rare items.
Mhm.
Many of them were published back in the 1700s, 1800s. They didn't always have a date. And I often find myself, if I have something by, say, Voltaire, for which there were numberless editions throughout all the years, I would often search the records to find a match for page numbers or height even. And I always thought this would be great if you could actually type in Voltaire and the number of pages and be able to search for the books in that sense. Do you think it will come to this where we'll be able to search almost any field?
There's nothing in RDA that would either prevent or allow for that. I think that's really more of an assistance question, depending on how you configure your system. But yeah, as somebody who also catalogs a lot of rare material, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I hope so. Yes, I think that would be good. Yes.
Who is assuming responsibility for maintaining and developing RDA? Is this like the Library of Congress assume responsibility for this, or who's the adjudicator on standard formats or changes to be made, updates?
I am not entirely sure. I know it's published by ALA Publishing, but that's just for the US market. It would be an IFLA associated working group and a working group at the Library of Congress or the National Libraries that would be involved in this. That's a good question. Yeah, but
because I mean, OCLC was great, and then all of a sudden we saw German records, black records from German libraries flooding in, and when you do cataloging in rare materials, you're swimming in material, and it was like, I wish there was an OCLC police, that would say, this is all the same thing, these 8 records, or even sometimes more than 8 records, and I can just see this RDA, where this could just take off and go to places where no one ever went before, and no one
right. Well, I think that would largely also depend on OCLC establishing filters that would allow you to filter out those records. It is possible to search only for English language records in OCLC to filter those out. Yeah, it's easier if you do a derived search, but it's LL. LL:ENG will limit your searches to, but yeah, I've learned that for the same reason, because otherwise you end up with 15 of the same very minimal skeletal records. Yes,
Is JSC disappearing then? You're asking, you're saying you don't know who's going to develop RDA in the future. What happened to the role of JSC?
The Joint Steering Committee?
Yeah. I thought they're the ones that developed it.
Right.
Are they gone?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So they'll be the ones who'll be the watchdog and
yeah, in terms of updating the rules, yes, yeah, yes.
That's what I was just gonna say. My understanding is, like you were saying, the international body is the joint steering committee for the development of RDA. So I guess I'm assuming that they'll continue to act and develop the content standard as time goes on. Of course, they don't control the bibliographic records that get created. I mean,
Right,
we're talking
right,
about,
that's-
the
that
OCLC
was-
thing
yeah.
is a very different. I mean, the OCLC, they want to go in a certain direction with their database as a huge aggregator of data, and they don't care about the fact that catalogers are wading through 25 different versions of records. That's not their concern.
Users would be wading through them too, right? I mean, people that use first search, are they pulling them up?
I think they're bringing them together in the WorldCat front end. I think they are. Maybe people who use WorldCat would know better, but I don't.
Yeah, that's an issue in ILL, because you come up with several different records.
In ILL too.
Yeah, those would be two different questions. That would be a joint steering committee for the development of further rules. In terms of further filters, yeah, that would be up to OCLC to establish that, but that would be, I don't see the impact of RDA to be quite as big as the impact of bringing in a lot of the European records, German records, French records, Danish is another one, yeah. Any other questions? Thoughts? Thank you very much then.
Don't forget to fill out your, fill them out, and you give them to you. You give them to Fred.
You can return to me, yeah, thank you. Very good.
Yes, they were to me for agreeable terms.
Well, you're on the one time. They mysteriously changed.
Where you
The latest version. I think that that's one of the changes. The other one is double.
She said someplace, oh, she said.
Yes.
He's very excited.
I know when you go back. Oh, yeah, I've seen.
Yeah.
I did that one too.
If following instructions from Mac, when you download, you have Mac.
They print it. It's not long enough, not too long. Yeah, I mean,
Thanks very much.
I know. They come back so
So thanks for coming in. You know, I'm actually toying with writing papers for a while.
yeah.
So maybe I can spare some time. Good to take responsibility. What's your normal job at Normal Day? What do you not do?
I'm head of cataloging at Theology.
Oh, you're in the catalog. And so that's is the office at Emory, or is it, no, that you're doing?
Well, all of Emory was an alternate testing. We have 5 libraries. Theology libraries.
Okay, so,
We do our own catalog.
okay. How do you work with the libraries?
We have working groups where we come together. We get a lot of associated catalogs. Right. It's actually good.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then, how long has it been in Emory?
Been in Emory since 2001.
Well, it's really nice to meet you.
You are,
I think very much my life so I'm not very well versed at all in marketing. I can run library school.
That's very kind.
Is that right?
yeah,
And so, I've worked for 9 years in the Theological Libraries. I decided to go to library school, more of my professional standing, but I'm very interested in non-mark editing. Digital library projects. So of course, we talk a lot about how this will affect non-marketing.
yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of structures, organizational structures are changing. At Emory, we used to have the working group called the cataloging working group, and the catalogers together. It was disbanded, and what came in its place was metadata. So we had a couple of people who work, a couple of people who do XML. So, and it's very interesting when people in these different fields start talking to each other, because I don't think there was much of that going on.
Well, no, that's right. The catalog is something that transfers over, but you have to get over it. There's not so we stuff it done out. As a computer expert, you just brought the kind of skills that you learned in terms of being consistent, using authorized forms, and then you're negotiating with the programmers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we've had fun though. It's been a lot of fun. Well,
Are you ready for detail?
I will be there. So maybe I'll see you in a month or so.
I'll be there.
All right, excellent.
Very nice to meet you.
Hi. Hi, Westminster.
Hi, good to meet you.
It's very interesting, and it's really little with respect to the presentation you're doing, because, we're working with a programming language called Xsquare, as well as Xsquare, and then actually another one called SEPTLA, so programmer working that works with that. So we're heavily involved. Hearing about RDA, but
I guess we use that.
no, I mean, like, contentious, it's happy says.
No, a lot of people were at the same time. It's to see what will actually happen.
Is that cumulative, or one replace the others?
It's a common confusion, it's legal terms, like, your first one.
They're subject headings, right, basically?
Yeah,
Are they changes in the subject headings as to do with just the theological?
That is.
Yeah.
But they're online, right? They're not active, it's not like I need to
So
say.
it gives you an idea, depending on your but we gotta go through the update of these, or, here's what's new, I need to change my thinking, I was not.
That's right.
Now we can see it.
The work, both those things.
That's if you're doing original theology.
And the other one
It's funny too.
also.
I mean, I don't assume that the work for the right now, it may not be.
Yeah, that's what I.
And it's very confused, and I've used
The problem is,
But it's not like you would go back and say,
say,
TCD.
What's